Okay, my friends. So I had a dream, and in the dream, I felt as if my guides were instructing me on a conversation that it was important that perhaps I had with whomever may benefit from that same said conversation. And so sometimes when I get what I feel like is guidance, I pause or I hesitate to try and capture the essence of something that came through the dream, because usually it comes with a bunch of waves of chaos and confusion of what some of the imagery and the symbolism might mean. And this time I felt like it was incredibly clear, and the concept and the topic was incredibly clear. And so I share it with whomever may find this in the realm of social media or wherever. And so the concept that came through is the concept of safety. And I was struck by, in my reflection after I was awake, of prevalence of how many times in the last while I have heard people talk about not feeling safe. And I certainly feel the energy of what's happening on a global level right now. And one of my favorite teachers spoke about the whole concept of everything in our lives as spirit beings transformed when nuclear arms became a real thing in the human experience. And that, prior to the possibility of nuclear war, people wouldn't often resonate in the intense level of fear that could come with the push of a button. We could all be gone. And that we know that floods and volcanoes and some of Mother Nature's way of purging itself of what is making it sick has the potential to do tremendous harm. Is there's never been the same frequency or energy around. We could all die, every single one of us. Is that we often think, certainly for me living in Alberta, when it comes to nature, I was always told, we live in the best place possible because, other than the occasional tornado, we are generally not at the mercy of mass destruction when it comes to Mother Nature. But the reality is, no matter whether we live in Alberta or BC or in the United States or in the Ukraine or in Russia or anywhere, the reality exists now that none of us are completely and totally safe. And that what that may create inside of us as humans is a perpetual, probably unconscious experience of what it is to be afraid and to live in fear. And I certainly think if we marry that to and add to that the last 2 years where fear was the primary, or not being safe has been the primary conversation that many people are having, both on the inside and on the outside. Again, one of my teachers talks about, we don't spend enough time in the internet. We spend a lot of time on the internet. And when you spend a lot of time on the internet, or even watching your television, watching the news, it would be hard to deny the fact that fear is what we are all being led towards and guided towards on a frequent basis. And so if we just look at the definition of what it means to feel safe, is the definition is that we have the ability to feel free, or there's freedom from danger or from risk or from loss. And so do we ever feel safe, if that's what it means to define what it is to be safe? And I go back to my starting point around the threat of nuclear war means that on some level safety is 100% an illusion. And there's always the possibility. And not just when it comes to the mass destruction of all of humanity, but the many different ways that things happen that are way outside of our control, that will always have impact and influence on the experience of literal safety. And so what I want you to consider for a moment then is, if we were to say safety is the ability to feel free from risk? What if we decided that we were going to choose to live a life from the space of courageous and or without fear? And that instead of going in search of safety, we go in search of what it might be to live free of fear, and therefore to choose courage, and what could follow if we were to choose courage. And so one of the things that came through in the dream is that, we might need a map right now. And part of that is because, again, if we go back to what are the things that we have been guided to most of our lives that is intended to help us be without fear, is that, for example, many of us have been taught, if you feel like you're not safe, or if you feel like there's something that's threatening you, is go find a policeman. I know I was taught that as a child. And so if you look at the image of what many people have faced more recently, not necessarily personally, but certainly in social media and on the news, is that a real choice anymore? Are those that are tasked with our safety, or in the past have been tasked with keeping us safe, are they really? And can we rely on that? Can we count on that? Can we take that to the bank? And then there's also possibly, again, I'll use our recent history as, if you want to find safety, find power, and or go to someone who has the power to be able to protect you, the power to be able to help you, the power to be able to keep you safe. And so I believe that's partly why we created governments, is that back in the day, you couldn't necessarily affect and impact and couldn't be in places where decisions were being made all the time, and individual people wouldn't be able to. So, if you elected someone to be your voice, and they went and they gathered with the other brokers of power and impact, that your voice would be heard inside of the collective. And so again, consider our more recent experience of how many of you feel that way, and how many of you feel as though you have been given the confidence, you have the faith that there is someone in your jurisdiction or someone in your world that is being your voice and speaking on your behalf? Or have you felt like your voice is either not being heard or being silenced by someone else's voice? And so what I want to sort of talk about is the concept then of, in the absence of the reality of there is no real safety, and in the absence of the reality of anything in the external or in the outside world has the both the desire, the willingness, and the capacity to do it for you, is then what is the solution? So how do we move beyond the impact of what it feels like to be living in a world right now where people don't feel safe, don't feel empowered? And so what came through in the dream is that I needed to talk about peace and the concept of peace, and that I needed to talk about faith, and I needed to talk about hope, and I needed to talk about trust, and ultimately at the end of the day, the concept of oneness and the overall concept of love. So I'm going to put that in the context of how it came through for me. And so when I look at some of what came through as potential blocks to peace, is that one of the most significant things, and I've alluded to it already, is that fear is a guaranteed way to block us from peace. And that, when we awfulize inside of our brain, we create a negativity bias. And I know that I have made some very conscious choices in the last probably 6 weeks or so to address that within myself, because I know that, and if you have followed me at all, you'll know that you probably felt, seen, or heard a version of what my negativity bias might have been and was showing up as. And so fear will block peace. The second thing that will guaranteed impact your ability to feel peaceful is the need to control, and the need to try and control everything but what you actually have control over. So those of you that have spent time with me in the classroom, you've heard me say frequently is that we control three things, and three things only in the entire universe. And it's how we choose to think, how we choose to feel, and how we choose to act. And so if we try and control all of and anything outside of that circle, is then it will get in our way, and it will feed the energy of powerlessness. It will feed the energy of I can't, and I'm not able to. And so I interpret that and I internalize that as therefore I'm concerned about what's happening and the lack of ability on my part to be able to control, and feel like what that feels like inside when you feel out of control and when you feel like you can't have control. And then the third thing is judgment. So the other thing that will always get in the way of our peace is judgment. And I've had many conversations recently with people about how difficult that has felt for me over the last, I would say 6 months or so, where I'm noticing my inner judge is fired on and flared up in a very significant way. And again, if you spend time with me, you hear me often say there is no right, there is no wrong, there is no good, there is no bad. It's just whether it serves or doesn't serve. And so even though I would say I've been holding to my belief and my principle of no good or bad, serving or not serving, it's in the perception of not serving and my lack of control and my fear that because I lack control over those things is that I'm going to lose my autonomy and I'm going to lose my sovereignty. And so in that, then I feel very switched on and fired on in my need to judge what I feel like isn't serving. And if I choose to judge what I feel like isn't serving, what's showed up is I feel like I need to judge those that I deem and perceive as being responsible for what's not serving. And whether that's people that I feel like are feeding fear and negativity and bias in their collective consciousness, or whether I feel like it's people who actually have the ability to have impact and influence, and they're impacting and influencing in ways in which I judge, is then it fires on and switches it on, and I notice what that does to me on the inside. Is that what it creates then is a cascade of emotion that is centered around things like fear and frustration and resentment and all of what I would call is emotions that don't serve me, don't serve my body. And so part of what came through in the messaging was, what am I doing to master peace on the inside? And so again, I go back to Carolyn Mace and her conversation about the inner net and what's going on the inside, and where can I put power back into my hands? Because anytime we're in trouble energetically, it's because we are not sitting in the seat of our power. We have given our power away. We've given it away to the things or the people outside of us. And so part of that is to just tell the truth and to be honest with ourselves about what are the things that you currently find cause fear or create fear inside of you, and know that they are stealing your peace, and that even though they may be things on the outside, it circles back then to that beginning part of the circle, which is your ability to control on the inside. And it's understanding that the experience of fear, the concept of fear, the emotion of fear can become a habit, and that we can get really caught in that. And that because of our negativity biases, because of our brains, our egos, our minds, is that we allow fear and then we react and we respond to fear in our typical ways. So that may be to hold negative emotions. It may be to avoid situations, to avoid people, to ramp up in the extreme. And again, I think that if we pay attention to what's been happening, is we've seen a ramp up in many different ways and inside of people, and that showing up in what might be perceived as extreme behaviors or extreme ways of being. And that on the other side of control, then, so what is our option? What is the alternative? What is a different choice? And again, if you've worked with me, it goes back to the concept of resistance, and that when I'm pushing against something, when I'm fighting against something, inside or outside, is that the only way, the pathway, the map, the first step, the first stop on the map is surrendering and accepting what is, and understanding that the things that we perceive as taking away our freedom or stopping us from living life the way that we want to choose to, and from the space of who we think we are. When those things outside of us are getting in the way of that, the first thing is to remember that everything is exactly as it's meant to be in this moment in time, and that we surrender and accept things as they are, and not just from the place of rolling over and okay, fine, whatever, it is what it is more of the energy is I don't necessarily have to understand it all. The what if or the what the fuck that often shows up is that I need to stop asking that question, and I need to just sit in the peaceful place of I accept that things are as they are, and acceptance does not mean I agree with them or I love them or I'm going to just embrace it as a beautiful thing. Acceptance is I accept the things that I cannot change. I mean, the whole concept of the 12-step process is that beginning of, give me the grace to accept the things I cannot change and to change the things that I can. And so the analogy that came through is the concept of, there's curves in the road sometimes to keep us on the journey and to keep us moving on the journey. And that if, when we, for example, in a car, if we were just to get on a straight road and that road was never ending and we could just see every 15 feet, we could see 15 feet further ahead, and we felt like there was nothing other than that straight road. There was nothing that we could see, the emptiness, we could see the nothingness, the no-thingness. Would we keep going if we thought this is never going to end? And that curves in the road give us that sense of awareness, of be in the experience and keep going, because you don't know what's around the curve. And that because the curve is coming and you can see it's coming, is it gives you an opportunity to stay engaged and in the journey and keep moving on the journey towards what's in the mystery, the beautiful part of mystery, the beautiful part of not knowing, and recognizing that that is part of how we move through life, is that in the absence of those curves in the road, what would it be like? What would we choose? And so we don't always know what it is, and yet somehow, and this circles back to, I think, one of the primary messages of the dream, and comes with the hope, the faith, hope, and trust piece, is the part of when we start to have faith in the journey of and our karmic books of life, and if we believe we are a soul and an energy being, then we know and we understand that we don't need to always know what's on the other side, but we trust that we're in motion and we're on the journey, and that's what we said yes to, and that's why we came here. And so what I want you just to sit with for a moment then is, what would peace feel like for you right now? And so if you were to see peace, if you were to invite peace, if you were to embrace peace, what would that feel like? What would that look like in your life and within what you have control over and what you can create? And that, if we're going to stay stuck in fear, if we're going to stay stuck in judgment, if we're going to stay stuck in all of those things that knock us off our sense of inner peace, then we also know from the perspective of how we manifest is that not only are we going to continue to struggle on the inside, but just think for a moment, if you understand and believe in the power of the collective and in the power of how to affect change and not control, how to affect change, is what are you feeding the collective soup every time you allow yourself to fall out of alignment with your peace, and when you allow yourself to fall into some of those other negative emotions. And so many of my spirit leaders have given me the opportunity to remind me of how important it is I stay connected to the perception and the understanding of what's happening at a cosmic level and what's happening at a galactic level, not just an earth-based level, but what's happening in the larger collective, and how things have needed to shift and change for a long time, and that we've been stuck. We, the collective, have been stuck in a pattern, and that we're being called, and that there's an urgency on some level in relationship to how we're going to meet that call, how we're going to heed that call. And that part of it is to really move in the energy of as I understand the collective, I also understand the power of that inner net and that inner scape and what it means to focus on, again, what I have control over, which is self. And so in the aspects of self, we talk about self-esteem, we talk about self-concept, self-awareness, we talk about self-confidence, we talk about all of those things that allow us self-care, that help us put the focus back. And when we retreat into some of those instead of retreating into our fears, is then we know that we have the ability to both respond and feel differently, but we are affecting the collective differently. And then we can stop making the outside and the outside issues and the outside problems and the outside people the problem. And we understand that we can bring in then the gift of discernment, the gift of grace, and that when we have that strong sense of self and we have that strong sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, is then we know that we can always hold our center. We have in the shamanic path, we talk about, holding your center and creating life from a grounded, centered space. And so when we have self-esteem and we have self-confidence, then we have the ability to be able to operate inside our lives and create from the space of being in our center. And that we move away from then continuing to feed what doesn't serve and what doesn't support the collective and what doesn't support the rest of the world, and certainly isn't going to support our bodies and our ability to continue to do better and be better in our lives. And so, if you think about it from the perspective of even just go back to what it was like as a child, is that, how you met fear as a child, and knowing that oftentimes the fear would grow. And again, the immediate would be go to mom, go to dad, go to someone else that you felt like could help you feel safe. And that we have had the experience lately of, where is mom? Where is dad? Where is that safe sanctuary on the outside? So I circle you back to the concept of, stop being afraid of what's at the end of the bed or under the bed or in the closet, and realize that the answer is going to come on the inside. And it is going to come in those concepts of what I just described in the form of faith, hope, and trust. And so I'm going to just take a moment to talk about that from the place of power, and that the problem we're having right now is power. Power in the extreme, power being used in a way that feels destructive, and power that feels like David Hawkins' power versus force, not coming from the place of force, but true power, genuine power. And that sometimes owning your power can feel scary, because along with that comes accountability and comes personal responsibility for the choices that you're making and what you're putting into the world. And so if you think faith, hope, and trust, and you just hear those words, what does that mean to you? Does it feel like that's a concept? Does that feel like it's an idea? Does it feel like it's an emotion? And if you were to ask yourself, where is faith, hope, and trust inside of you? Where does it exist? And if you're looking for it outside, what would that possibly be? How could that possibly be? And that we have been taught even that it comes from outside. Faith historically was to come from religion, from following guidance that was given to you in a book or in a teaching or at a pulpit, and that was what it was and means to have faith from the outside. Hope is, somebody else is going to fix this. Mom's going to fix this. Dad's going to fix this. The policeman is going to fix this. The politician is going to fix this. Somebody's going to fix this. And so hope comes from outside. And trust is all about the way we've been coded and scripted, is that people aren't going to hurt me. People aren't going to do harm. I can trust that people are going to do the right thing. I can trust that people are going to support me, hold me, keep me safe, all of those things. And that at the end of the day, what I believe is happening, and perhaps absolutely needed to happen for us as the collective, is those archetypes of those things coming from outside is crumbling. And that we are no longer allowed to have faith in anything outside. And that it is about what is it going to look like and feel like on the inside. And I'm not talking about faith in the form of narcissism or faith in the form of me. I'm talking about faith in the form of my power lies within, and that the only place I can pull and create and generate power is from that space, from within. And that then if we look at the divine sort of organic nature of spirit, it doesn't mean that I don't have guidance. It doesn't mean that I don't have support. Is that I do believe and feel, I do believe and feel that I am always held and guided, and that my guides are always with me, that spirit is always with me, and that one of the most powerful ways I can be reminded of that is that anytime I ask for grace, anytime I ask for guidance, anytime I ask for support, it is coming from that space of not because I'm desperate, but because it just is. It's always there. It's mine to reach for and to open myself up to hear the message and to hear that guidance. And that then you have, if you think about what it takes to fire you on and keep you moving in these difficult times, is then you have steam, that sort of me steaming me forward and moving me on. So faith in myself from a humble space, from a grace space, faith in the fact that I'm guided and I'm held, and that my job is simply to ask and to stay open to receiving the message. And that when you have faith in yourself, then it's easy to have hope, because then it's the piece around, I don't control the outcome of many things, but I do believe and I do know and I do understand that I have absolute capacity to have impact and influence, both on the inside and by choosing to respond in appropriate ways, appropriate from a principled place. I am having impact on the outside, and it's the impact that I'm choosing to have, and that I want to and need to choose to inspire in perhaps others. That's what gives me hope. We did a teen program a couple of weeks ago for a group of 23 teens, and I observe and I notice and I watch what's happening in the little microcosm of my world and my clients, and I see the struggle. In fact, some of you know my hypnotherapy teacher, who, from my perspective, was one of the most powerful women I know, completed suicide on the 15th of February. And I absolutely was in shock, because it felt like, for many of you perhaps, what it would feel like if you found out or heard that I had chosen to end my life. That's how strong I felt like she was. And I haven't been a fundamental part of her life in the last few years. I did have contact with her in December around a referral, and I felt like it was a very regular conversation. I definitely did not feel like I was getting the sense there was anything deeply wrong on the inside for her. And so, of course, again, I sat after I found out had I known that was the last time I was ever going to speak to her, I might have taken a few more moments and had a deeper connection around how are you and what else is happening in your life right now. But so busy in just dealing with the things that I felt like needed to be dealt with and the ways in which she could help. So hope comes when we realize that when we start to lose faith on the inside, then we will potentially lose hope, and that then we move to the idea of and the concept of trust. And trust, again, is something that, what is it to have inner trust? So I trust myself to know when I'm in struggle, and I trust myself to have enough self-awareness that if I need something, so you've heard me say, again, if you're in my space, issues are just unmet needs. And so I have a trust and an understanding that if I'm struggling, I have a need, and that need is currently not being met because it's manifesting as a struggle. And so I trust that with energy, with intention, and with grace, I can look to a variety of different ways to get that need met. And sometimes that may require reaching to the outside. And if I reach and the need is still there, it's not being met, then where else can I reach? And whom else can I reach to? What else can I choose that will support me in that moving out of self-pity, moving out of the energy of frustration, anger, resentment, all of those emotions that keep us caught in the spin. And so I want to wrap this up from the perspective of the message, again, that came through in my dream time, is that you are never going to be safe in the context in which safe has been offered to us historically. That did end, and it ended when humans decided to create weapons of mass destruction, and that it will start on the inside, and that it will end on the inside, and it will gain strength and power in the middle on the inside. And that part of what needs care right now for all of us on the inside is, what do we need to replace fear and resentment and the energy of victimization, victims of systems, victims of people, victims of war, victims of many things. What is it going to take to replace fear and the energy of victimization with faith, hope, and trust? And what are we willing to do in the surrendering and then the accountability to create that and to build that and to make that be our mantra? And that we, in choosing that, we remember the distinction between, that David Hawkins gave us, the distinction between when we do things from the energy of force and when we do things from the energy of power, because the energy of force has been very, very, very strong in the collective. And so the final parting message thought that came through is, to sum all of that up, is that at the end of the day, it's love. And that love is going to be the thing that moves us beyond and moves us to the next level. And that, imagine for a moment that if the frequency we all resonated in, no matter what's going on, was love, could a human ever push that button? Could a human ever run over another human on a horse? Or could another human ever post on social media words of deprecation and criticism and judgment and condemnation? Would you ever look at another human and judge them and criticize them and condemn them for who they choose to be in that moment and where they choose to stand and how they choose to sit? So I love you. I send love into the world. What I hope you continue to do every day, as I'm choosing every day, is remember what it looks like to be love and to experience love. And that it's, as we become better givers of love, then we automatically become better receivers. And when we are in the energy and the frequency of love, there's nothing else. Nothing else can exist. So thank you for sharing in my dreamscape and for listening.